Next slide. Okay, the next drill, since we were so successful on that one, is to look at thoughts that contain an I, me, or mine, explicitly or implicitly, and ones that don't. So this is all about just two chunks, I, me, my thoughts, and ones that aren't about I, me, my, explicitly or implicitly. Okay? Same 1 minute. Close your eyes, please. Take your minute. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyata tattvavid Pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnang gachan svapan shvasan Pralapan visrajan grunnan unmishan nimmishan ape Indriyani indriyarteshu vartanta iti darayan Brahman yadaya karmani sangam chaktva karmiyaha Lipyate nasa papane padma patram eka ambasa. Okay? What'd you find out? How many I, me, my thoughts were there? A lot. How many ones that weren't I, me, my? Not very many. So it is all about me. And it is. All of our thoughts, virtually all of the self-referential, symbolic consciousness, blah, 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 it goes on all day long, is all about me, explicitly or implicitly. So it gives us a fruitful place to go to look at, okay, we deconstruct the I, we maybe can deconstruct the thoughts. Maybe thoughts will stop if we can tear apart the I. Next. These are my very, very well-drawn schematics of what we feel like our I is. We feel like it's one thing. If we have a bad hair day, or we feel older that day, or we get promoted, the I feels very flush, very great, very excited about itself. We've seen now that the I has many, many places, locations, scattered all over the place, many different functionalities. Next slide. The question of how the I gets built as children, we know this pretty well. A big chunk right now is this, more on that in the next slide. What you're born with genetically, where you're born, when you're born, to whom you are born, the culture you're in, exposed to, religion, and then later on who your friends are. This, though, is filtered through whatever this is to begin with. So it's a very tight screen it fits into as you build your I. Next slide. A Nobel laureate, this is moving too fast, a Nobel laureate, Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, said, you can read this, your joys, sorrows, memories, ambitions, personal identity, free will are no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and associated molecules. He was very deterministic on genetics, not surprisingly. He discovered DNA. But we do have many. There are thousands and thousands of these you read about every day in the popular press, proofs that some or other gene expression ties to some behavior. Some very careful studies, some much less so, but there is a lot to genetic determination. How an I gets built, and if you have kids or grandkids, know that this is how it starts out. Up to like a year or so, they're beautiful creatures. There's nothing sticks, they're just exploring their universe. However, as time goes along, sometime in 1.5, 2, next slide, what'll start to happen by the time we get to an age like this, scripts get stuck to this core that we began life with. These scripts can be all kinds of things that we, out of the millions, billions of things that flash across our consciousness, we, God knows why, grab hold of a few of them and make those very important, and they become who we are. We could have just as easily haphazardly chosen a bunch of other scripts. We choose these scripts. Next one. And how do we decide which ones we choose or don't? I was not conscious of my choosing, this is going to be a script I'm going to hold the rest of my life. They just came in and they stuck. Well, in addition to things like attention, novelty, emotion, which we believe might be causing this lockdown of this particular script to form the I, we now have some good scientific information, this is even in nature, that the theta frequency that goes across the brain that correlates different regions of the brain functionally. If the neurons fire in a way that they are not interfered with by the overall theta correlation that's going on in the brain, they get remembered. If not, too bad, not a memory, not part of the eye. So we are constructing our eye haphazardly. Just so happens if an event occurs that fires in this sequence, it gets remembered. If not, not. This gets on, as you go on and on with time, we've all been through this thing, all kinds of stuff gets glued together. Next one. And they get more and more complicated. Post-it notes get stuck all over this thing haphazardly from God knows where. And we believe, amazingly, that how we played soccer as a 4-year-old has something to do with how we're doing in the business right now, or this current relationship we have with somebody. Amazing that we can be conned into believing that putting us all into one big mass has to be done, that there's some relationship between these disparate, haphazardly assembled pieces of paper. Thank you. Another question, well, we jumped here too. It's okay. We also believe we solve problems. You know, that I sit down and I solve the problem. This self-talk, conscious jab, 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 actually solves problems. Point of fact, we know it doesn't solve problems. This is a follow-on to the famous Libet experiments of the 1970s, which you've probably all heard about in this conference several times already. This was in the best, in JCN last year, 2 papers. They gave a very complex question to people, thought problem. It couldn't be solved by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It had to be 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, 5, 6, J. You gave them that problem and said, okay, go off and solve this. So they, okay, off they went to solve this. Whether it took 30 seconds or a minute or half an hour, what they found was that through EEG and fMRI, they could predict with 100% certainty who had solved the problem, and it had just been solved, and the information would be sent up to, from the right frontal cortex up to the, okay, here it is, we solved the problem center, who would soon announce, I have solved the problem. Next slide. Next. So conscious thought didn't solve this. Conscious thought was clueless as to how this solution was taking place. It was all running around crazily talking to itself, but nothing was happening there. All the work was being done offline, in the non-subconscious, not in this self-talking blah, blah. Next one. This is not too surprising. If you look at the relative functional capacities of this self-talking quasi-mind, there, next one. We have, this is another axiom in cognitive neuroscience, you can only hold 7 plus or minus 2 symbols of different sorts in consciousness at the same time. That's your working memory. That's the RAM that you have. We've evolved over time, maybe the last 30,000 or 40,000 years. This tiny little RAM sits on top, okay, of a massive, massive computer. 100 billion neurons, 1 trillion connections. We've got this little tiny RAM sitting up there that can do 7 things plus or minus 2, remember to the time. A buffer overrun, big time, big time. So you say, well, okay, this is a massive hard drive, many high-speed parallel processors sitting down there, and we get this little tiny thing on top. Why do we evolve that way? Well, arguably, and this is arguably, we did this because if a tiger was coming after us, and we were running 1,000 programs, it wouldn't work out very well for us. So we may have evolutionarily found it necessary to keep a small RAM with this huge offline processor just to be able to survive being hit by a bus. 2 big questions. One, these are great practices, not enough time to do it today, but can you predict your thoughts? If you have some time this afternoon, tonight, whenever, just sit there for 2 or 3 minutes and see if you can predict the next 10 thoughts you're going to have, or predict what you're going to say, think 5 minutes from now. You'll find out you cannot do it. I defy you, even with doing a mantra to beat it into submission, you cannot predict your thoughts. If you can't predict the thoughts you're going to be and can't control which ones are going to arise, why do you think you're in control? And why do you listen to this thing jabbering all day long? It doesn't have a clue what's going to come up next.